A new report from the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, says that if you raise minimum wage to $15 an hour, you'll kill jobs. And in other news, water is wet. Yeah, we know this. Everyone with any sense in their head knows this. It's by far the consensus of economists out there. It's really the cranks that disagree with it. The cranks and those with a political agenda to push. You know, as it always is, as it always happens. Because you've got the new Keynesians and maybe the MMT guys and socialists, if you can even count them as economists at this point. I don't know, but no, because this isn't just some kooky Austrian thing. This is all of classical economics. You even got things like the monetarists, just all across the real business cycle, all of them are saying, yeah, of course it does. Don't be a nincompoop. Why wouldn't it? How could it happen any other way? How could things shake out any other way, especially with a really big one like this where you're going to more than double it? So it'll reduce employment, increase the deficit, according to a nonpartisan government analysis. Can't even blame Trump for this, because regardless of whether you want to say that these were some Trump leftovers or whatever, well, it wouldn't have been anyway, because it's the Congressional Budget Office. It's under Congress. It's not under the executive branch. So so this is Peter Suderman, who kind of brings on the hyperbole. As in a bombshell report, the CBO came to the shocking conclusion that raising the federal minimum wage to $15 would cost the economy more than 1 million jobs. Now, he's being facetious, but I'm sure there are a lot of news people out there who would react that way. Oh my God, this is shocking. A bombshell. Actually, they wouldn't. They just ignore it because it doesn't fit their narrative. But CBO estimates raising the minimum will cost 1.4 million jobs, reducing total national employment by 0.9% in 2025, the first year in which the full $15 would be in effect. And that's something else I've talked about that kind of lets you know that they don't really believe this, because they keep trying to up it slowly, little by little. If it's such a great thing, why not just go ahead and make it 15? Why not make it 50? Why not make it 1,000? Yeah. That's how you expose them. They know this is the case, people. They know it, and they're pulling a fast one on you. Some people's wages would increase, lifting about 0.9 million people out of poverty in the process, but these higher wages would largely be paid for by consumers in the form of higher prices. And a lot of those consumers would be the same 0.9 million people who just got their wages increase. So they're like, yay, I'm making more money. Wait a minute, everything else costs more, and I really can't buy any more than I could before. Because what do I keep saying, people? It's not about the dollar amount. It's about the purchasing power. So, and especially like if you're, if you work at Walmart, not some kind of high skill jobs. Walmart, I think their starting salary is $11. So you get this $4 raise to $15 an hour. Well, you're probably doing a lot of shopping at Walmart too. Or if you're not, you're shopping at Target or whatever, some other place with lower prices. Guess what? They don't have lower prices anymore, because they got to pay their workers more money. That money's got to come from somewhere. Where do the costs of a product get recouped? It's at the point of sale. So it would be paid for by consumers in the form of higher prices, and knock-on effects to employment, taxation, and various federal programs would raise the deficit by about $54 billion over the next decade. So then he says, yeah, he's being hyperbolic. It's not a shock. It's not a surprise. Anyone with an ounce of sense in their head would know. But it's fairly obvious that substantially raising federal wage requirements would result in some number of employers choosing to employ fewer people, especially in rural areas with lower costs of living, where the employers are likely to be more sensitive to increased labor costs. Of course, hiking the minimum wage would cost jobs. And you see, that's another problem. They're looking at this $15 an hour like that's the same throughout the country. But like in places where they live, in the ritzy areas, yeah, $15 doesn't buy you all that much. But if you're out in rural Kentucky or somewhere like that, yeah, I'm not picking on Kentuckians, just an example. But, the cost of living there is going to be a lot lower. And so that $11 you make at your Walmart job is going to go a lot farther. Look at how much rent costs, and look at how much, you can get, people laugh at the trailer parks, but you can go and rent a trailer for a lot cheaper than you get an apartment in New York that's smaller and trashier than the trailer. I think I'd rather live in a trailer park than live in some of those New York apartments that are much more expensive. So, the cost of living is not the same thing all over the country. So it's ridiculous to say, there's just going to be this one minimum and, I don't know. In recent years, it's become fashionable in certain quarters of the left to minimize or outright dismiss the negative effects unemployment caused by raising the minimum wage. We've got tons of examples on this channel right here in this minimum wage playlist that you might be watching this on. This might be towards the end, so you might have already seen them, but Bernie Sanders cited figures from a study that assumed that raising the wage would result in no net changes to employment. They baked in that assumption into their figures and went, oh, look, everyone's making more money. Yeah. January press release put together by House Democrats cited a related analysis which declared high-quality academic scholarship, that's not a proper citation, by the way, confirms that modest increases in the minimum wage have not led to detectable job losses. Notice the words modest and detectable. We've talked about this before. What they do is they look at these really tiny little increases in the minimum wage. And of course, the tinier the change is, the smaller the effect it's going to happen. And if you make such a tiny change that the effect is going to be so small that it's below the margin of error, then what is it? You say it's indistinguishable from zero. Yeah, check through this playlist. That's actually what one of them says. Indistinguishable from zero. That says, not detectable. Well, not detectable just means it's not within the margin of error, but you look at the small enough change and you rig things up so the margin of error is bigger than that, and that's what they do. It's complete fraud, people. But how is that going to describe more than doubling of the minimum wage, $7.25 to $15? That's not a modest increase. That's not a tiny little thing that's not going to make any difference. Even though the tiny little effects do make a difference, they just don't show up on those studies. But yeah, this is much, much bigger than that. In any case, the left of center gloss on minimum wage research tends to dismiss research to the contrary, of which there is plenty. And he mentions a report just last month from the University of California, Irvine. David Newmark and Peter Shirley did a review of 30 years of research on the minimum wage. Published in the National Bureau of Economic Research, the clear preponderance, almost 80% of minimum wage studies since the beginning of the Clinton administration concluded that minimum wage hikes cost jobs. Because what we're being told, the lie they're feeding to us, is that, oh, well, you see, that's the old way of thinking, but now they've discovered that things are going a different way, and all of the new studies are saying that there are no job losses. Lie! Lie! Yeah, no. Total lie. You've got a few studies that they were able to manipulate into appearing as though that's the case, using methods like what I just described and others you can see in this playlist. But the vast, overwhelming preponderance of them confirm minimum wage increases cost jobs for the people who need them the most, for the very people they're supposed to help, which are poor people, minorities, people entering the workforce for the first time. Yeah. And that's what this says. This evidence is stronger for teens and young adults as well as the less educated. Young, less educated people would account for a disproportionate share of those reductions of employment. And although this article doesn't say that, we know from other studies that a disproportionate number of those are going to be black. So, which side is the systemic racism on? Do I need to remind you that minimum wage was a policy of the eugenicists? It was one of the ways they had, since they couldn't chloroform everyone, which is what one of them actually said. Yeah, it's too bad we can't chloroform them yet. You know, but at least we could do a minimum wage and stop them from getting jobs. And when you have the current situation, it's hit younger, less educated, lower earning workers especially hard. The economic effects of Joe Biden's $1.9 trillion COVID relief plan, which includes hiking the minimum to $15, noted the large amount of research finding that unemployment has been disproportionately concentrated among lower wage and young workers in specific sectors, e.g., retail and leisure and hospitality. The very group that's suffering the worst effects of these lockdowns are the ones who are also going to be hurt the worst by the minimum wage increase. So, yeah. The push for higher minimum wage is coming, even as the Democratic Party's economic policy orthodoxy has moved left in an effort to run the economy hot. The prevailing belief among many of the party's technocrats is that previous generations of left-center policymakers were too worried about inflation and not worried enough about employment. Yeah, that means that even more inflation is coming. Whether or not the balance of concern was misplaced in the past, it is certainly true that jobs and employment matter immensely both on a macroeconomic and a personal household level scale. Jobs are part of the foundation of a strong economy, and stable employment has major individual benefits. Entry-level jobs are a key way for younger, less skilled, less educated workers to build valuable skills that can help them maintain work over a lifetime. Yet Democrats are now backing a policy that would, in all likelihood, significantly reduce employment and longer-term employment opportunities among those who have already been hurt by the COVID recession the most. You got problems, Democrats are just going to make it worse, which is all they've ever really done. They've just been really good at pointing the finger at someone else and say, it's because of racism. No, it's because of you. And something else I would remind you of. All this focusing on jobs misses the point. It's not about jobs. It's about the productivity of things that make people's lives better. That put food on the shelves and clothes on the back and, let them live their lives, a little better and healthier and more comfortable. And that's what, we need jobs to do. And jobs do both of those things. They both, if you work a job, you're making someone's life better in some way, which is why you're getting paid, and then you can use that money to make your life better. That's how it is. Just focusing on jobs as though it's the end-all be-all is completely misguided, and it's going to lead you into some very strange and destructive places. So always keep that in mind. Thank you very much. As always, comments for the comment god, shares for the share throne, like, subscribe, the bell, and please go to donate.bogosity.tv. Give what you can, all sorts of ways, PayPal, cryptocurrency. I'm trying to work on some nicer ways of paying through cryptocurrency. There's really been a lot of improvements going on with that, so hopefully I can incorporate some of those, as they become available. And also, Patreon and Subscribestar, just $1 a month will get you these videos early, ad-free, unedited, raw, all that wonderful stuff. You can get to see me in, all my unedited glory, if that's really what you want. So up to you. And there are other tiers as well, like $3 a month. You can ask a question for the monthly AMA. $5 will get you a shout out. So check all of that out at Patreon or Subscribestar. All the links are at donate.bogosity.tv. Thank you so very much. Hope you can weather all of this pretty well otherwise. And until next time, stay strong and be free.